In today's show, the Blazers kick off their final long road trip of the season with a dud. They lose in Sacramento and put their play-in hopes in jeopardy. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's program, we're going to talk about a dud. The Blazers haven't had a stinker like this in a very long time, but they kicked off their final long road trip of the season with a stinker. They go into Sacramento and lose 128-107 in a game that was not competitive in the second half. It puts their play-in hopes in jeopardy. If they had postseason dreams, they may have crashed down tonight in downtown Sacramento at the beautiful G1C. We'll get into that game. Talk about all the implications, tanking and playoffs that come with it. And then I want to play a little game at the end of the show about what I call the do-nothing playoff game. I've mentioned that I think the Blazers could do nothing and compete for a playoff spot next year, and I want to run through the teams in the Western Conference, assuming that everybody does nothing, an admittedly stupid exercise, and talk about where the Blazers could conceivably finish, or at least where they'll be in the mix. We'll do that to close the show. We'll a little prognosticating under circumstances that will not actually exist. But first, let's do what we do. Fastest recap in the West. Blazers lose 128-107. I mean, yikes. Yikes would be the best way to describe this one. Yikes. Down 9 after 1, 36-27. Denny has 12 points. It's only Denny. He could use some help at this point. Down 18 at halftime. Out of hand in a hurry. Down 9 after 1. Down 18 at the break. The Kings shot 6 of 16 from 3. They're not a high volume 3-point shooting team. They don't jack threes at a crazy level. They finished with under 30 3-point attempts in this game, which is like super low in the modern NBA, where teams are pretty regularly putting up around 40 a night. But the Kings shot 22 of 27 from 2-point range in the first half. 22 of 27. 81%. They had an effective field goal percentage north of 70. They just made shots. And I thought the Blazers in the first half particularly just didn't get anything easy on offense. Denny had 12 in the first quarter and finished with 17 at halftime. He was leading the charge. But it just felt like the Blazers offense didn't come easy. The Kings came into this game having lost 4 in a row and losers of 8 of 10. They were in a bad place, right? They were in they were feeling like that their chances of making the play-in, of playing even a single postseason game, were slipping away. The Mavericks are coming. The Suns, although they lost by 10,000 points to the Celtics, they have been a lot better lately. They've looked much more like at least a meaningful NBA team. And the Kings are probably feeling a little bit of their own mortality. After the last game against Oklahoma City, Zach LaVine told the assembled media in Sacramento that the vibes were really bad. They were bad. And so this was a vibe check game for the Kings. Are you going to punt on your season and just call it good and move into whatever's next? Or are you going to say, one of the teams chasing us to make the postseason, we're going to handle them and make sure that we control our own destiny, right? This was a chance for Sacramento to say, we're going to win. We're going to beat a team that's chasing us, kind of put them in further enough down in the standings that it's going to be very challenging for them to make a push. And if we don't make the playoffs, it'll be because we lost, not because we gave the game away. They just dominated. They dominated that second quarter, and it didn't get better. The Kings, again, 22 of 27, 80% on twos in the first half. They went 8 of 8 on 2-pointers in the third quarter. Through 3 quarters, the Kings were 30 of 35 inside the arc. That's 85% on twos in the modern NBA, where the world is like, hey, take threes because they're worth more, because you just can't make enough 2-pointers to make up for shooting 35% from three, right? You can't shoot 60% from two to make it worth it. The Kings shot 85% through three quarters. They led 100-82 after three. I thought Portland just didn't get much offense. Through three quarters, Denny Avdia was pretty darn good, and the non-Denny's were pretty darn bad. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Through three quarters, Denny Avdia had 23 points on 7 of 10 shooting. He had made 4 of 6 from three and 5 of 5 from the free throw line. It's a pretty darn good night. Denny Avdia is a good basketball player. He had 23, 9 rebounds. Nobody else really came with him. Actually, Anthony Simons had a totally fine game, but not a particularly impressive one. He had 15 on 6 of 12 shooting. That's a good game, to be sure, through three quarters. But it's not like a notably big night. It's just like, you need him to score, and he's scoring points. Through three quarters, the non-Denny Avdias were 21 of 60 from the floor. That's 35%, including 9 of 36 from the three-point line. That's 25%. Yikes. Denny and Ant had combined for 7 3-pointers through three quarters. They were 7 of 14 from three. Everybody else was 6 of 28. They just needed more help. Scoot Henderson left the game in the second half and did not return. Denny Avdia left. He sat with just about 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter because the Blazers just never made it competitive, and he didn't play down the stretch. Because Scoot wasn't in the game, I guess they had to play Ant those minutes. I don't really know why Anthony Simons ended up playing 37 minutes in this game, but he did. I mean, I do. I know why, because Scoot was hurt and they didn't go back to him. Or Scoot was not available, but they didn't want to go to Delano Banton, I guess, or something, and they feel like they were just rolling that way. But the game was never competitive in the fourth quarter, and the Kings roll 128-107. They did finally miss some twos. They missed a total of 4 of them in the fourth quarter, and they finished the game 38 of 47, a preposterous 81% from 2-point range. 81% from two. Some of this is the Kings are uniquely skilled at scoring in the mid-range, right? Zach LaVine is a great pull-up jump shooter. DeMar DeRozan is one of the best in the history of the league at scoring, isolation scoring from two, right? I don't think DeMar DeRozan will make the Hall of Fame, but if he does, it will be because he pump faked so many damn times in the mid-range and scored, right? And DeMar gets to the free throw line. He took 11 free throws. The Kings in that third quarter took 14. The Kings took 12 field goals and 14 free throw attempts in the third quarter. They just dominated the Blazers, got whatever they wanted, got to the free throw line, didn't matter. Some of this is the Kings are unique. They shoot more. The highest percentage of field goal attempts come from the mid-range of any team in the league. They play relatively slow, so they take they take a lot of 2-point jump shots. Domantas Sabonis lives a lot in the mid-range. He shoots very well from three this year, but not at a high volume, right? It's what they do, right? Is they take middies, they take a lot of twos. But 81% is preposterous. It's outrageous. The Blazers defense never really put up enough resistance for this to matter. Toumani Camara was on the injury report heading into this game. He's questionable with left foot soreness. He was guarding Zach LaVine in the first half, and Zach LaVine went nuts. I think I don't want to chalk it up to like Toumani moving a little bit slow, but Zach LaVine had 20 points, and I felt like Toumani Camara didn't really bother him. Another injury news I didn't mention this on the show yesterday because I was just talking about other stuff, but I think this is of note for you to know. Blazers two-way player Bryce McGowan, his season is done. He has a fractured rib that he sustained playing in the Remix's final home game last weekend. On Tuesday. That's neither here nor there for this particular game. Bryce McGowan wouldn't have played or been active. Maybe he would have played the final 2 minutes, but wouldn't have been active. But I don't think the Blazers put up any resistance against the Kings. They just couldn't. Weren't able to, and they were unable to get any rhythm outside of Denny Avdia. And with 6.5 minutes, like 6:40 coming out of timeout with about 6:45 left. Chauncey Billups looked at the minute sheet, said he's already played 32 minutes. There's no reason to play more Denny. We're headed out on the road. This is the beginning of a road trip. the Blazers head to New York over the fly across the country, and then they'll have the weekend off, Friday and Saturday off. They play a Sunday evening game against the Knicks, followed by Tuesday in Atlanta, Thursday in Toronto, and a back-to-back leaving Canada and playing the Bulls on Friday, and then they're finally back home against the Spurs on Sunday. But this is the first of 5 out on the road. This was the time for the Blazers to make their move, and they didn't. Let's talk about where they are on the standings and where this puts them. They haven't had a stinker like this in a while, and that this was a bad time to finally have one. Join me in the second segment. We'll talk about the impact of the stinker, where the Blazers are in the standings as they keep their slim play-in hopes alive, and also drop down the Tankathon standings. Join me in that second segment, won't you? First, though, let's talk FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, and it's also March Madness. I'm recording this on the first night of the Sweet 16. You were listening to this on night 2 of the men's Sweet 16, and FanDuel's giving you the chance to get on the action during the tournament. Not just the men's tournament, but when the women's tournament kicks off this weekend, you can get in on that action too. It is time for you to send some bad juju to the team that wears dark blue located in Durham, North Carolina. One of their teams was very successful. I'm hoping the second one is less successful. But regardless of how you're wagering, FanDuel is going to make it more fun for you because new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So you're going to get $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, or even who's cutting down the nets, or even who is finally taking down those folks from beautiful Piedmont region of North Carolina, located at the university with Gothic architecture in Durham. Whatever you want to do. It doesn't have to be betting against Duke. It should be, but it doesn't have to be. The tournament games are going to be happening all weekends, and you can get on the action on FanDuel, whether if you're chasing underdogs or if you just want to go more traditional wagering styles with spreads, point totals, game props. It's all going to be waiting for you on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right. Haven't been too many stinkers like this in Blazerland. They had not lost to a team that was below 500 on the night of the game since freaking January 14th. Basically when they turned their season around, when things got going, when second night of back-to-back, they beat the Bulls on January 19th. That was game 42 of the season, and they've just been better since then. They've been a better basketball team, trending towards a straight-up good basketball team, but they've just been a much more competent basketball team. And part of that juice was not losing to teams below 500. Well, the Kings came into this game at 35-37. Depending on how you want to slice it, the Blazers had won 9 consecutive games against teams below 500. That stretch also includes 2 wins against the Suns, who are now below 500, and 2 wins against the Orlando Magic, who are now below 500. So, kind of how you want to draw the math. Blazers maybe were as many as 13 straight games against teams, had won 13 straight games against teams below 500. When they had played bad teams, they had taken care of business. But if you want to do it like record on game nights, 9-0. Shoosh. It had been a minute. It had been a minute, right? Like they just, since January 14th, they hadn't had this. And it wasn't just that they lost, right? They haven't had a game where they've just been handled in a while. I think the OKC game in Oklahoma City, where Oklahoma City rested everybody, but that was a 2-point game with 7 minutes left, and the Blazers just kind of floundered down the stretch. They lost their last 2 games by double digits against Cleveland and Boston, but if you watch those games, while the Blazers weren't within single digits of the Celtics, I believe, in the entire second half, and certainly all of the fourth quarter. That's just off the top of my head. I guess I could flip back in the old notebook. But while they weren't close, they weren't out of the game. They weren't it wasn't oh, you're getting spanked, you're down 23 like they were to the Kings. And against the Cavs, they were right in it at the 6-minute mark of the fourth quarter, 2-point game with the ball. Some things didn't go their way. They made some mistakes, and they ended up losing by 11. But they haven't had a stinker, a game where they just get absolutely throttled in literally months. In months, it has been. I guess they got throttled. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that. They got throttled by Denver twice right before the All-Star break, and Minnesota right there too. But they haven't had a game like this where they not only got throttled, but they lost to a team with a losing record in literally months. They had hung with, for the most part, good teams. And when they had lost big, they had lost to, very quality teams, high-level playoff teams, or at least playoff teams. And they'd taken care of business against every team with a losing record. They not only lose to a team with a losing record, but they get thrashed. And it puts them in a tough spot, tanking-wise. Or, play-in-wise. Puts them in a good spot, tanking-wise. More on that in a moment. But with this loss, the Blazers now find themselves way back. The Kings are securely a half game ahead of the Dallas Mavericks in ninth place with a 4.5 game lead, a half game lead over the Mavs in ninth. The Mavs sit in 10th. They beat the Orlando Magic tonight because the Orlando Magic are a terrible offensive team. Maybe they should have acquired someone from Almonte Springs to help juice their offense. That's suburban Orlando if you're nasty. But the Mavs, because of their win, move into sole possession of 10th place. 4 games ahead of the Blazers. The Mavs have a 4-game lead in 10th. The Suns are in 11th, and even with the loss that the Suns had the other night, the Blazers lose again. They are now 3.5 back of Phoenix. So Portland sits in 12th place, 3.5 back of 11th, 4 full games back of 10th in the final play-in spot, and 4.5 games back of 9th. If you really wanted to believe, it's not looking good. They're just, they've got 8 games left, and they have to cobble together out of these 8 games 4 more wins than the Mavericks. You're probably talking undefeated. I mentioned when there was 10 games left that you had 8-2 was probably the number you had to get to. That was like the realistic number. Well, they dropped the first 2 games of their final 10. So now you're talking about 8-0. I think it's going to be 8-0. They don't have the tiebreaker over any of these teams. Sacramento and Phoenix have the head-to-head. Dallas is going to get it by virtue of a better record against conference teams. It's against the Western Conference. The Blazers can no longer catch the Mavs in conference record. They couldn't heading into the night, but now they can only catch Phoenix in conference record. But Phoenix has the other head-to-head. But it's if Phoenix wins one more game against the West, the Blazers are cooked there as well. They probably got to go 8-0. They probably got to win out to get to 10th. But if you're looking the other way, this was a productive night in the world of the tankathon. The Blazers are now find themselves alone in 9th place. They're effectively tied with San Antonio. San Antonio lost again tonight and have lost 2 in a row, but after a low winning streak. But San Antonio's 31-41. The Blazers are 32-42. Up 1 in both the win column and the loss column. Effectively tied in terms of win percentage. But that will straighten out. These two teams play each other on April 6th. When the Blazers are back home in a week, this will get taken care of for the most part. Almost certainly. Tank tiebreakers are broken differently. We'll get into that when we get there. But the Blazers now sit in 9th. They've got a 20.3% chance of getting a top 4 pick and a 4.5% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. And they could conceivably chase down San Antonio to get into 8th. Miami's won 3 in a row. Chicago won an improbable game against the Lakers. Truly one of the wildest last 40 seconds you'll ever see in an NBA game. Go look it up. Strong recommend to see how the last 40 seconds of the Chicago game played out. They've won 4 straight. Those 2 teams are gone. Miami has such a strong incentive to make the play-in and then really try hard to make the playoffs for pick reasons. And Chicago's just kind of rolling. They're just like crushing teams in the fourth quarter, finding weird ways to win, and they do it. Do I feel like I triple jinxed the Blazers in this game? Yeah, I do a little bit. I do. I spent yesterday's program talking about how it would be better if they lost. Like, they don't need to lose out or anything. I'm not calling for that by any means. But, for pragmatic reasons, it'd be better if they lost more games than the Spurs down the stretch of this season and ended up with the 8th best lottery odds, just because the numbers are the numbers. You jump from a 20% chance of a top 4 pick from where they are now in 9th to a 26% chance if you get to 8th. That's a big one. The jump that they made from 10th to 9th is huge. It's 13.9% to 20.3. Yeah, that's a 6% increase. Like that's meaningful. There's losing stinks, but if there is a bright side, silver lining to this is that's like a useful loss. Tanking sucks. Losing on purpose sucks. The Blazers didn't lose on purpose in this game. They just were bad. They played a bad game and hadn't played a bad game in a while. But not only did I say like it would be better if they lost and for pragmatic reasons and just like general team building reasons, it's going to be really hard to finish 10th, and in reality, it's losing would probably be better for them. If you play the first 73 games straight up and you lose the final 9, it's fine. I don't think they need to lose out by any means, but like I talked about the value of losing, and then I also said that they're better than the Kings and and they would win in Sacramento and kind of make it all moot. Well, they got thrashed, they got throttled, they got stomped. Double jinx. I said it'd be better if they lose, but they were actually going to win. Are you kidding me? The curse of the pessimistic positive podcaster. That's triple P. That's like sounds like a Michael Holden broadcast thing. That is I feel a little bit bad about that. But speaking of prognosticating, another thing I have said on the show is that if the Blazers did nothing, I think that they have proved through the second half of this season that they'd be good enough to compete for a playoff spot. So what I want to do to close the show is look at all the teams in the West and play the do nothing game. If this team does nothing, will the Blazers be better than them next season? Join me in the third segment. We'll do nothing and play a little game. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. So I mentioned on the program, maybe just in passing a couple times over the last 10 days or so, that I think if the Blazers did nothing, they could compete for a playoff spot, which admittedly is a relatively low bar in terms of like, they're good actually. Is like next year they could not change the roster and they could compete to be, 7th or 8th in the West. But considering where they were and the expectations when they started this season, I do regard that as fairly positive thinking. I do. It's not the pie in the sky type of thing, but that's not really what this podcast is. I know who I am. I am myself, and I am a bit of a pessimist. But I do think that the Blazers have, based on sort of their statistical indicators, how good they've been on defense, their general net rating. Obviously, we'll look at it at the end of the year and see if it still sticks that way, and you get smacked by the Kings. Point differentials is particularly meaningful with this type of stuff in terms of indicators. But I think they've shown over the now 30 plus games that they're pretty good, right? They're better than the bad teams, and they've been competitive with some good teams, and they have rarely, only a handful of these have they gotten like really beat down and blown out. The Kings was one of these games. And I think sometimes when you lose, these are actually more like, they're sobering, but they're better for like, I think, realism about where the team is. I don't like when people overreact to single games and say like, they're really good. And I really don't like when they lose and they say they suck. See, I've been saying this all year. It's like, great. Congratulations. You just waited around long enough to find some ammo to be proven right. This is the hater's guide. But what I want to do here to close the show is an exercise that I'm calling the do nothing game. If we look at the standings in the Western Conference and we say, what if this team did nothing? Like, what if we assume that they make no or minor moves? For our purposes, we're going to say nothing. We're not going to say add a rookie or whatever, add the number 1 pick. We're not going to Cooper flag anyone, right? We're just going to, guys. Cooper Flagg's proved he's really good. He's made his money. He's the number 1 pick in the draft. I would love if his college basketball career just was just ended. Just end this weekend. No one needs to see this gentleman play any more basketball. We're good. Okay, go Tar Heels. In any case, here's the do nothing exercise. A team that I'm confident the Blazers will be better than next year if both teams do nothing is the Utah Jazz. Put the Blazers above them. We're up to Blazers are up to 14. Then there's a group of teams that I think if those teams were to do nothing, the Blazers have a chance to be better than them just straight up. The Pelicans, the Kings, and the Suns. The Suns are more talented, but they're just messy, and they don't have enough depth, and they don't have enough defensive talent, and Kevin Durant is old. Kevin Durant is awesome. He's fantastic. I think his longevity would be hyper celebrated if LeBron James didn't exist, because the fact that Kevin Durant is still as good as he is at his age is really, really, really special. And the number of miles he has on him and the number of seasons he's played. Obviously, he's been a little more banged up than LeBron over his career, but like the fact that he's still playing, he can still play consistently at the level he plays at is really impressive. But he's older, which means that he might be on the decline at some point, and the Suns just aren't very good. They're not very good. They're not awful, but they're not very good. I'm confident the Blazers could be in the mix with Phoenix. I'm confident they could be in the mix with the Kings, regardless of what happened tonight. Like I said, it's a little sobering. I think it's in some ways like informative, like identity informative. Oh yeah, this is what the Blazers look like when they're not good, right? This is what, like, because if they only play well for a stretch, you're like, well, they're actually really good. But then it's like they hadn't had one of these where it's like, oh yeah, that's what they look like when they're struggling, right? I think the Blazers could be in the mix with the Kings, no problem. And then the Pelicans. I almost put the Pelicans down low with the Jazz because I don't really know what to make of them. But I think Zion Williamson, when available, is one of the 15 best players in the league. I'm a really big Trey Murphy believer. I don't think the Pelicans are awful. I just think they're kind of not that good. They're not one of the special teams, right? Obviously, they had a very good year the prior season, and just in terms of wins, it just didn't translate this year, and a lot of that was due to health. But I think the Blazers could be in the mix. So those teams the Blazers are in the mix win: Pels, Suns, Kings. Then there's there's two teams that I just don't know what to make of, and I'm calling it the fragile bracket or the fragile group. The Mavericks. Kyrie Irving tore his ACL. When will he be available? If he's available before Christmas, they're going to be good. If he's available after Christmas, they're going to struggle a little bit. If he's available, if it's 12 months, which I think would be a reasonable recovery, and he returns in the second half of the season, I don't know how ACLs work or whatever, but I know typically you get like sort of that 10 to 12 month window. So like depending on what part of what portion of the spectrum that Kyrie's recovery is at, the Mavs could either be like right back and be a pretty darn good team, or they could be, a fragile group led by Anthony Davis, but without the depth. They're built, they have good role players to be sure, but they just, and I like Najee Marshall a lot, but I just, they're not that good without Kyrie Irving. They're a team the Blazers could be in the mix with. And then the Spurs. Wemby might take off and they might just get really good. But the Spurs weren't at any point this year with Wemby in hand really good. But then they added De'Aaron Fox, and those two dudes never played together. So it's hard to know. Wemby's also dealing with deep vein thrombosis, so is Damian Lillard. Hope both of them get well soon and are able to play basketball when the season returns in the fall. But I don't know what to do. I think the Spurs, because of their depth and because of their youth and because of the I guess general uncertainty of what their peak is, although I do think they're going to be pretty darn good, I'll put them in this fragile category. It's almost an uncertain category. And then I'll add two other teams to this list: Clippers and the Warriors. They're just a little older. It's just older teams. James Harden, still darn good, older. Kawhi Leonard has looked awesome the last couple weeks. Obviously has a long history of not being available and older. And the Warriors are old. They're good, but they're old. Steph is, the wrong side of 35 for their three best players. If we're assuming do nothing, which is totally unfair for this exercise and nonsense to be sure, the Blazers could be either of those teams seems like it could go south for them in terms of just general health and general availability, the way it works for any 35-year-old NBA player, any 35-year-old basketball player. Either they fall off production-wise or health-wise, and the Blazers could be in the mix. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams that the Blazers could conceivably, in my mind, be better than. I have trouble seeing them, Oklahoma City, Houston, Denver, the Lakers, Memphis, because they're so young. Any of those 5 teams, I have trouble seeing the Blazers being better than. Minnesota, is in that team. Any of those 7 teams. 6 teams. I'm bad at math. Oklahoma City, Houston, Denver, Los Angeles, the Lakers, Grizzlies, and Wolves. Those 6 teams, I think, I am hard-pressed to say, in the do-nothing world, yeah, the Blazers will, be better than them. Obviously, there's bad luck and all of those things, but this is, we're assuming, I'm not even assuming good health. I'm assuming reasonable health based on your personnel. It's hard for me to see them being better than those 6 teams. But everybody else seems to be in the mix, which means that I'm very comfortable saying the Blazers could, and I'm going to say it again here, if they do nothing, compete for something like as high as the seventh seed in the West. If they do nothing and things break their way and they get good luck and you expect like their young players that they have a slew of to get better, right? You expect a mild improvement from them. Mild to very good improvement, I guess, from them. I guess if you expect like a huge breakout from both Scoot and Shaden, you could say like this is the fourth best team in the West. But I think that would be unfair to sort of like it's kind of unfair to the exercise in general. Like the Blazers have breakout candidates of their youth and no one else does. But again, this is the do nothing game. I think if you just look at the sort of age of teams and the quality of teams and the uncertainty moving forward, I think if the Blazers do nothing, they could be in the mix to finish as high as 7th. Obviously, they're going to do something. Teams are going to do something. The whole world is going to change. But I think what has changed for me over the stretch of the season is that not my belief in maybe the Blazers' like overall plan, right? I think I have generally the very same feeling about the Blazers' like overall approach. But I've changed my opinion on the Blazers' overall talent level. Denny Avdija is better than I thought he would be. Toumani Camara is more impactful than I thought he would be. They've cobbled together a very good defense while playing Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp and Anthony Simons a bunch of minutes. Like, it's Donovan Clingan has propped up and been a good defender. Adding Matisse Thybulle to the mix has been a good. He's been good. There were times during the early stretch of this second half run where DeAndre Ayton was very helpful and impactful. There were times during this second half run where Jeremy Grant, while he couldn't make 2-pointers at any point, was like pretty darn good on defense. They found ways to make it work. They haven't relied on a single player, although Denny has clearly been their best player. On offense to like carry the scoring load, they haven't relied on a single player. I think in the do-nothing game, I am comfortable with the Blazers finishing 7th while realizing that, like, when you list the Clippers and the Warriors and the Spurs and the Mavs, very, very easy to see them finishing below those teams, too, in the do-nothing game. I'm just talking about the range of outcomes. And for me, in the do-nothing game, the range of outcomes stops at about 7. But if the Blazers were in the mix to be the 7th seed in the West next year, I feel pretty good about their trajectory. The league is going to change. The league always changes. The do-nothing game is merely a game that we play in March. Come back for more shows next week. It's what we do. Also got a fun interview nailed down for next week, too. We're making it happen as the Blazers hit the stretch run. But next time you hear my voice, the Blazers will have played the New York Knicks. We will talk about that game on Monday's program. That's a Sunday afternoon game out here in Portland, Sunday evening in Madison Square Garden. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.